but from the Capital Punishment Research Initiative at the School of Criminal Justice in Albany, New York, which is part of the state university system. Michael Radelet from the University of Colorado at Boulder also is present this afternoon. In addition to his many other titles, Mike also is one of our original advisory board members of the Capital Punishment Research Initiative. This is September 8th, 2007, and we're sitting in the home of Watty Espy, who lives in Headland, Alabama. We've traveled here today to interview Mr. Espy, who in the words of Ivan Solotaroff is America's foremost historian of executions. This interview is part of the Oral History of the Death Penalty in America project. Through a nationwide series of oral histories, this effort is designed to document and preserve the words of scholars, lawyers, activists, and others whose lives have intersected the death penalty in America. Good afternoon, Watt, and thanks for agreeing to share some of your memories with us.
Good afternoon.
If you could tell me a little bit to start about your background. You were born and raised in Headland, is that correct?
Yes. I didn't finish college. I went for about 6 months to summer school, about 4 months, and we entered the Korean War, and I quit college and joined the Navy. I've always felt and feel now that when one's country is at war, it's the duty of all young men to go to the defense of their country and to think nothing about it. And that's what I did. I returned to the university after I got through with college, but I had learned a new way of life while I was in the Navy. And on my return to college, I was no longer interested in scholarship. I was interested in having a good time. And consequently, I quit after about a year. And that was the extent of my college education. I've always been interested in true crime. I guess you might call me a true crime buff. But most of my books deal with the subjects of true crime. And I used to read avidly. My eyesight is not too good now, and I don't now. But back around 1970, I became aware of so many books that were printed that were just wrong, where they said people were not executed who were executed, and different things of that nature. So I decided that I would just research and find out how many errors there were. I didn't think there were very many at all. The first state I looked was the state of Tennessee, and I asked for a list of all people who'd been executed in the history of the state. Well, I received a reply giving me a list of the people who the state had electrocuted in the electric chair. But they told me that prior to then, the executions were carried out on a county level. And that was kind of difficult for me to grasp at first. Finally, I thought, and I said, my goodness, this means that I'm going to have to research every county in the United States if I get a total figure. So I started off with Tennessee, as I said, and I found my first errors in Tennessee. They had a period from I may be wrong on some dates that I give you, it's not my fault, since I've had diabetes and all my memory is somewhat affected. But found out that they had a period in Tennessee's history where they had no death penalty in effect because they amended the Constitution to provide that any person convicted of rape could be sentenced to die, but if they were convicted of murder, they could not be. And this was a situation for 3 or 4 years when the sources indicated that there were no executions, but there were 2 or 3 executed for rape during this period. Then they changed it back to where persons found guilty of murder could be electrocuted also. And then things began to pick up, and that's when Tennessee began executing in earnest. So as I moved on to other states, I just found out that where possible I would visit the county seats and go through those, their old newspapers, any place in the world where I could find information, old information, and I would back read the newspapers. In other words, assuming there was a microfilm roll that ran from 1917 to 1918, I would start at the back of that roll and read forward. That way I would get the execution and trial and things leading up to it, because I wanted to gather as much information as possible on each particular case. And I had no financial support from anyone from 1970 to 1975. Well, Henry Schwarzschild with the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty came down and looked over my work and all of that. And he said, well, I want to see if I can't do something to get you some help.
The way Henry tells that story, Watt, is that you were writing him both when he was at NCADP and at ACLU, and he was getting this mail from some guy in Alabama at persistent inquiries about executions, and Henry said, who the hell in southern Alabama is interested in all this? So eventually Henry says, I got to go down and check this out, and that was how the two of you originally met.
Well, Henry, after he saw it, said he wanted to get me some financial aid, and I told him it would certainly be appreciated. And he contacted the University of Alabama, and they in turn gave me a law library clerk's salary, which was very little, but at least it was some help, and I had access to that law library, which was a tremendous help to me. And so I carried on that for 7.5 years. And the thing that brought about a termination of the thing was that the university wanted to get some outside money, so they wanted to turn to the federal government for it. And they had to have someone with a college degree to write the grant proposal. And they settled on somebody from the criminal justice department. And death penalty too, and he was the only person I knew, so I said, well, Speckle will be fine. So they wrote up a proposal and submitted it and received a $200,000 grant for 2 years. And I let them take the small cards of just a stack at a time in there and get some information that they wanted to get on the first batch. And this information consisted of the name, race, age, sex, crime, and some things like that of each person. Well, when the time was up, they didn't have it ready, and they rushed so they could take the form of the first stage up and show that they were doing something, so they could go into phase 2 and get the other $100,000 grant. So they were going to take it up there, and I found out that they were going to take it up there, and I looked it over. And I said, well, this won't do. I said, I'll renounce the whole damn thing if you try to put it on the computer at the University of Michigan. They had women listed as men. They had, you know, very Beverly was a very common name for a first name for a person back in the 17th and 18th centuries. And they had women listed as rapists that been executed for rape. There were just all kind of very, very obvious letters. So Speckle set forth some conditions. He wanted me to let him take all of my small cards and everything over to criminal justice and do it over that. And in effect, cut me out completely and just give them the thing, which I would not do. And so it came down to him. Well, he was a tenured faculty member, and of course I had to go under those circumstances. So I came back here where I continued as best I could, getting back with Bill through that library loan and things of that nature. Almost ruined my eyes.
You said, oh, I'm sorry.
What?
I was going to ask, when you said you came back here, is this the office where you did your work?
It was an old house that my great-grandfather had built, and that's where I came back to. Well, my health started failing. I have diabetes, and it started affecting me. My walking and talking and thinking and all of that. I used not to be so hesitant in my replies. But I found out that I could go to the state libraries and find records of slaves who were executed, because it used to be in most states. Now, Harry Frazier assures me that this was not the case in Missouri, that in most states, if the state executed someone, they were destroying someone's property, and they had to pay compensation to the owner a property that they took and destroyed, if they lynched them or they were killed other than through due process of law, they didn't have to pay. For instance, my great-grandfather, and he was also the great-grandfather of Jeanette, had his head cut off when he went to bed one night. He had put this slave woman that day for letting the youngest son, who was her great-grandfather, go to a gin against his orders, and the kid got his arm torn off. And that night, the husband of the slave went to the house and chopped his head off. We found his wife's gravestone, but have been unable to find his. In fact, my mother was named after his wife. But
And Jeanette, who you referred to, is now keeping you as a nurse and keeping house and
as a caretaker.
As a caretaker. So, and you share great-great-grandfather who was murdered by his slave.
Right. So when they captured him, the family would have to agree to this. But the family evidently agreed to burn him instead of trying and hanging. So they burned him. The family received no compensation for that whatsoever, because he was not executed by law. Look, I found out that I could go through the state records, the
State Treasury.
State Treasury record to find who had been executed, which county it was in, and how much compensation was paid. So I was able to get the compensation by Alabama, and I went through Florida for those, and that was my main source now. It was the record that's contained in the state library and all. And I went on with that until I developed diabetes, and it didn't really affect me. I didn't think it would. But I very quickly developed neuropathy, diabetic neuropathy, which affected my legs and my mobility, and consequently I was forced to stop what I was doing. I have 2 computers, but I mean, I can't sit here that long. It just tires me out.
When did you first learn about your great-grandfather and how he was killed? Were you a small child?
No. My family, like most Southern families, don't talk about families and the children. It was just, I had heard rumors, not my great-grandfather, that a white man had his head chopped off here in this county, and that a slave was burned alive. Oh, I guess I was about 8 or 10 years old. And when I started this research, I read in the papers that a fellow named Lindsay in some account it was spelled Linzey, but in most of it was spelled Lindsay, which is the way we spelled it, was killed. And I started asking around and finally found somebody who told me. It was a newspaper away from here. Now, I don't know how y'all know how they got the newspapers away from the place where the crime actually happened. But every newspaper sent out 3 copies of that newspaper to other newspapers, and they were printed. So these were copies of a newspaper in Abbeville that was printed in another newspaper. When I found out that the name was spelled Lindsay, then I asked some of the older members of the family, and they said yes, and told me the story of it. It's interesting, but it's beside the point when it comes to legal execution, because it wasn't a legal execution. To show you how it worked, we had a man named Porter Bibb lived up in North Alabama, I believe, and around, I believe it was in Madison County. He was a very, very prominent man. He was the son of the second governor of Alabama, the nephew of the first governor of Alabama. But he had a boy who was about 15 years old, who was playing with a Negro boy about 16. And he ended up, as boys will play, the black kid hit him over the head with a stick and killed him. And he ran away, and they got him, and the general populace wanted to burn him. And they gathered around the Bibb household, and old man Bibb got out of the front porch with a gun and told him that I've lost my son. Already I'm not going to let you lynch my slave where I won't get any compensation. So y'all go on, and he ran the mob off, and they ended up trying the black kid and hanging him. He was about 16. And Mr. Bill got his money.
When you talked early on, Watt, you told us after the military you're out here and you started reading true crime books. And that was the inspiration. You found an error in a book and you wanted to look at that, and somehow this grew into a huge, almost a lifelong project.
Yes. I found errors in a lot of books. And I find them now, and I follow. But my eyes are such that it hurts me to try to read. I can't write. My handwriting is so unsteady I can't even make all the checks out. The girls who work here make them out. I sign as best I can. My family owns the bank, so they reckon me
How did this project grow to be so big? You've collected over 18,000, documented over 18,000 executions, is that correct?
No, it's over that.
Over 19.
Yeah, but that includes
Post-Furman.
Post-Furman. That I don't really have small cards prepared on it. And where people have sent me stuff and I have it, but I just don't have it on a small card. It's just packed with little stuff.
And what, can you talk about, when you say small cards, by that you mean a 3x5 card?
Yeah.
But can you talk about the ledgers that you have too and that you kept on executions? I don't know if they're here.
I think they're over here.
You can.
Zooming in on you so you can just lift it.
There's one, 3x5, this is the rows and rows. If you can see this, I have all these 3x5 cards. You can zoom in on that, Sheila.
Looks great.
This one is from a Thomas Murphy. I'll just read it quick. February 26, 1825. White hanged at Mobile, Alabama on 2/26/1825 for murder of John Kilbourne. See large card, and there's some sites here where this information came from. And there's one for each here, Mike, you think?
Yes,
One for
organized
each
by
one.
state.
Organized
So
by
that's the
state.
main data file, but then it's cross-referenced to books and to files and to articles that.
You see the ledger?
Ledger? I don't know, but
Let me see that again.
It's,
Okay, that's
oh, you
ledger.
can swing the cover open. I
Okay.
can see.
So this is not, we just randomly opened up a page. James Adams, executed in Florida at Florida State Prison, and then it says St. Lucie County, that's the county of conviction. Robbery, murder of Edgar Brown. He was an elderly rancher. The murder occurred November 12th, 1973, and as Watt will know, there's a lot more information about that case that we have available, but the ledger here, we opened to Florida. This is organized, I think this is the one organized by state.
1661, 1665.
65, a slave named Jacob. This must be,
This is Maryland, it appears.
no.
No? No.
but you know, so these ledgers go on page after page with records of
By state. Now,
Hanged to 1860. James Nixon, Savannah, Georgia, murder.
so all organized by state. We're up to Georgia. Now we're in. Is this Virginia? West Virginia? No, this, yeah, Virginia. Here,
I see some down New York down here.
maybe this is New York.
This is by year, it appears, so it
Well, it could be all different
Different.
Oh,
jurisdictions.
I see. Right. Okay. Yes, 1858 executions. Right. Exactly. That's how we did this. Yes, starting out here,
Yeah.
1747, 1772, 1790. So this is all. This is the one that's organized by year.
This is all your handwriting, Watt. You did all these.
yeah. There's another book like that.
I was looking for it. So that's the ledger by year. And there's a duplicate ledger. No, I'm not seeing not finding the other one. But there's 2 ledger books like this.
The other one is by state, chronologically.
And every entry in there you've made. And all the index cards, all those are documented as well, right? All the executions are documented there as well. And when did you start this, Watt? What year? 1970.
Yes.
And you collected them, I read somewhere, for 17 years, or was it longer?
Well, 1970, 1975 was whenever I was at the university. So that would have been 15 years. And then on, I was back here.
And an interesting thing is that Watt, you had to basically train yourself not only on law, so that when you saw a cite to a court decision in the beginning you had no idea what that meant, but also on basically historical methodology, on respect for the data, making accurate records, and how to preserve the stuff for future generations.
Well, my dispute with Smith caused me to lose my position at the university. It was by insistence on everything being exactly right. I felt like if it wasn't right, if it was haphazardly done, wasn't any need to do it.
And we should also say for the record that after Watt left the University of Alabama and came back to Headland, the university was stuck because they had spent $100,000 of NSF's money and had a lousy data set. So they actually employed Watt, not Smithcliffe, but the university, really through the Office of the Vice President for Research, employed Watt to work here in Headland to correct the errors. And that error rate, and I know about this because Watt in the university worked through me in Gainesville. They would communicate through each other through Gainesville. But Watt discovered a 10% error rate on the first draft of all the coding. So had a hand correct it, then he would send that to me in Gainesville. I'd send it back up to Tuscaloosa. So the file that's now at the University of Michigan is the one that's corrected by Watt. Thank God he was able to do that, or else there'd be this 10% error rate. Also, that mistreatment of his data by the faculty and students up there resulted in only half of the possible data basically was coded. So that's why we don't have race of victim, or I don't think age of victim is on there. You know, there's several other variables that, had the project been completed, they would have had a complete, more complete record of each execution. And furthermore, it ended with, the numbers may not be right, Watt, but isn't it something like 14,900 records?
No, they ended up with 14,400 or something. By the actual correct figure, it would have been 14,900 or something. So they just didn't list all of them.
And then, of course, after that, you've documented another several thousand that are not on there, and it's anybody's guess. I mean, right now we know through your work of, what, something like 18,000 executions in the history of the United States. And there could be another 4,000 or 5,000 where there simply were no records. There was no appeal, there was no newspaper articles, and we'll never know about it.
I'm certain of that. Now, I have here, I don't have it in the ledger, small cards, but in one of my books here, I have where 2 men were executed in the colony of Jamestown. Or wait a minute, I believe they got them in the colony of Roanoke, which disappeared, you know.
You came to this, when you first started this, did you have any particular thoughts or feelings about the death penalty,
Yes.
one way or the other?
Yes, I'm a Southerner. I was raised a Southerner. And 90% of the people out here believed in the death penalty, and I believed in it. But when I found some obvious cases of innocent people being executed, I said, this just can't be. Because I really had such faith in the criminal justice system that I thought that they just didn't make mistakes. And consequently, I guess within a year or 2 of that started this work, I became very much opposed to the death penalty. And I am very much opposed to it now.
And that's because primarily of the innocence, the few innocent cases that you came across, or you think?
Yes, I can think of nothing more horrible than the state executing one of its citizens who's innocent. It's horrible from every point of view, even from the point of view of you've got a killer who's still running loose because nobody's looking for him. They're executed.
You said innocence was one of the things that made you think about the death penalty. And Mike has been instrumental in writing about innocence for years.
Yes.
Was that the original connection? How you two found each other? How did you two?
No, Mike got his data from Watt.
Oh, well, so that is then
That's
innocence
part of it. The first big project that Watt and I collaborated on was he gave me information on every white person executed for killing a black. There wasn't a whole lot of data that you gave me, Watt. There were only 30 cases, but Watt had documented those and gave that to me, and that paper was published in the late 80s. But in the early 80s, when Hugo Bedeau and I were dealing with innocence, we only dealt with 20th century cases. But Watt did a terrific job of sharing information, not only from his records and the index cards, but also Watt in those days had one of the biggest collections of detective magazines, like True Detective and Master Detective and True Crime, anywhere. Libraries didn't keep that stuff, and Watt would keep copies of articles written about individual cases, some of which were accurate, some which were not accurate, but at least he had this collection. So for many of the innocent cases, he was able to pass on those detective magazines, and usually we checked their sources before publishing it again to make sure they were accurate. But that's just one example of the lengths of Watt's research that he went to document these executions.
And these magazines, I've seen copies of those, by the way, at Jonathan Grades's office. And up in New York State, I saw some copies of some of the True Detective magazines.
In his office.
Jonathan Grades, the New York State Defenders.
Yes.
I saw some he had up there one time, some papers they had sent up to our archive. These True Detective magazines, all these sources, you still have those, correct? They're still...
No.
They're not...
Well, a number of years ago, I made an agreement with a person that we would share And he let me have them. I had them, I guess, from about 1985 until I moved down here in 1985 until a couple of years ago, and he wanted to use them then for some research of his own, and I let him have them. I've got a few that I overlooked at the time. I've got a few. Two police cases there, something like that.
But most of that collection went back to what was his name? He lives in Connecticut. Is that right? To sorry again. H-E-R-N. H-E-A-R-N.
Daniel.
I was like, there was something to that. I'd be interested in the process of each case. When you got some information on a case, you'd come back, type up a card, add it to the ledger. Would you get 2 or 3 at a time? How did that process of actually documenting all this stuff?
Well, I copied them.
With a manual typewriter.
Mike, look over there behind that green chair, and you'll see some 2 or 3 notebooks. And I copied. I thought you would.
So you copied into notebooks?
No, I would photocopy.
No, they're not here. They'll turn up.
You're not getting too tired, are you, Mr. White?
Not yet. I can go in a little while.
Okay.
See if you see any notebooks on any of those shelves.
You got a box, there's a whole box full of notebooks over here in this, right here. I don't know if this is anything. Here's a whole.
That's all you can get.
When you get to where you want to take a break, you just let us know.
I don't know if that would be what he's looking for or not.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
And there's a big one up here too.
oh yeah, that's the other
That's
ledger.
the other ledger.
Most of the notebooks is
Oh, maybe not.
Let's see.
see if you can see what state that
Let me
is.
turn this up.
Okay.
This is McCalsey, Mark White, hanged West Virginia,
All right, that's a West.
1948, University of Alabama, stamped on it. Mail order Bluebears, Treatise of Modern Marriage Monsters. This was 1938, True Magazine. Crimson Secrets, Powers, Harry White hanged. West Virginia, 1932, Daring Detective Magazine. These are all copied into these different notebooks?
Yes. But these are just some, most of them are in stories.
Here's Wyoming, for example. There's a different state in each notebook.
Some of these aren't quite in here. We just want to tuck in the
Hasn't
back.
been filed yet, yeah.
This is handwritten here. Oh, this must be an old slave record.
Where?
Tom, a slave, hanged Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Is that what that is? It's handwritten, very small script.
Yeah.
I'm just loosening here.
So what would you estimate in storage? Probably maybe 50 boxes like this with information, and of course your books. There's a few hundred here, but you got.
I don't know, Mike, how many there are, whether they're 50 boxes, most of them are not in boxes. They're just stacked.
And every bit of this has your hands on it.
Huh?
Every bit of this. You've copied all this, you've collected all this yourself,
Yeah.
personally.
Never with any assistance and never with any financial support other than from the university. I would imagine that the interlibrary loan librarian at the Headland City Library probably became pretty good friends with you, Watt, over the years. And the postman bringing information from all over the place.
Yeah.
A lot of this you wrote for. You'd write to different.
I would write different library loans and get newspapers, accounts.
Well, in these thousands and thousands of executions that have spanned centuries now, could you describe generally what changes have transpired in the way people have been executed in this country? And
Well, hanging, of course, was the original deal. Some of them, now don't get me wrong, some of them have been pressed to death, one man. You've had people who were burned alive under judicial sentence,
Sawed in half.
sawed and hanged, tried, put in a nail up in a box and sawed and hanged. You've had all forms of practically anything the human mind can imagine has been tried, but it finally settled down to hanging, which was a horrible form of execution, and that they would put them on a cart. They would tie a rope around the neck and just drive the cart out from under them and leave them hanging. Well, of course, very few necks were broken that way. They just, the question of slow strangulation. So it was a horrible thing. And most jurisdictions didn't like it. New York was the first to change to the electric chair, which became the next method of execution to be used. Then there were some shootings, one in Nevada and Utah, few shootings, and the condemned man had a choice in shooting a hanging. And then after that, Nevada instituted the gas chamber, which was considered even more humane.
Well, this is the home where Watt did most of his work and lived when he came back to Headland from the University of Alabama in the late 80s. And as you can see, it never was in the best shape. It was a duplex. Sometimes there'd be a family living in the west side. Watt had the whole east side here. Occasionally would have a roommate. But the home is not air conditioned. The electricity is never very good. So, and consequently here in South Alabama it gets quite hot during the summer, as you can imagine. So during the day Watt would oftentimes stay in his pajamas. He'd wear a hat, a fedora hat, and in those days he was a chain smoker and not very good with the ashtray. So when you entered the home, there'd be ashes on the floor. It's really quite a fire trap, and the walls would be yellowed from the smoke. Although in the living room here, which he had turned into his study, he had pictures of a couple hundred executed inmates, 5x7 pictures that somebody had given him. And when the pictures tilted, you could see behind on the wallpaper the yellow from the smoke. So, and the curtains were always drawn to keep the heat out. So Watt in town was known as eccentric, basically. This guy who stayed in his pajamas all day in the unair-conditioned house transcribing microfilms of executions from the 19th century. I have no idea why anybody would think that to be eccentric, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And the house also, one of my memories here is coming back late at night and Watt turning on the lights in the kitchen, and I think every square inch had a cockroach. But Watt just would take the newspaper and bat them away and not really think twice about it. That was no big deal. So it's not exactly the setting where you think that really, I would say, one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life, inside or outside a university, the true genius of the death penalty historian. It's not exactly the type of location where you think such a person would be located, but indeed this is it.
Let's take a...
When you're ready, Sheila?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm coming just a while.
You see that?
Okay.
Dated July 4th, 1989. From the Capital Punishment Research Project of Watty, Espy to Dr. Robert Alada, Department of Communication, James Madison University, Harrisonburg, Virginia. And he's writing to ask for some data up there about executions. Yeah, apparently he sent him some information on the case of Yet. He's looking for some more. With best wishes for your continued good work, I am sincerely yours, Watty, Espy. So, letter might be down here. Those are all index cards still all the way to the bottom?
Yeah.
Anything here?
I just
Particular note?
open them and... Yeah.
So this is
Folders.
state by state information. Virginia, GHI. So we pull that, and it's newspaper articles more recently from 1994, but from somebody sentenced to death in Virginia.
Most of these are the mail that people send them the stuff in the original envelopes there.
Yeah. No, the Danny legal would not. Danny is lost
Oh,
friend who
something
just got
else.
out of jail.
Georgia, Florida, Georgia, RT. Let's see what Georgia RT is. You got any idea, Mike, what these might be?
Cases of Radelet through Thomas. Okay.
All jurors found male guilty in Rockdale slang, so these are news articles.
And post-firm and more contemporary stuff.
Folders look old, huh? Indiana, old something. And these are mostly news articles, copies of news articles. This is just incredible. Sheila, I don't know how much of this you can get. And there are some of these incredible spinal card systems.
So here's some old detective magazines over here. Police Detective. These are all collector's items. The Police Detective magazine from November of 1978. Original price 75 cents. But, you know, so he used to have bunches and bunches of these. It's interesting, Ted Bundy told me before his execution that his favorite pornography was detective magazines. And I never realized it until I came to Watty. And it's often on the cover, a beautiful woman getting killed, and then, but you read inside and there's nothing to match it. So I'm just picking these things out. Here's a woman, you know, gorgeous with the eyeliner, whatever they call it, in her underwear, getting stabbed. You know, all of them. Here's another blonde. Here's a couple women partially disrobed. Here's a guy killing a naked woman.
What years are those, Mike?
These are from the 70s. But every single one of them, and you know, this is like a random sampler, is the line between sex and violence was like when Ted Bundy killed people. This is another story for another interview, but it was a sex crime. And he would, you know, it's just again and again and again, the same sort of thing. And Bundy did tell James Dobson, the night before he was executed, that he read a lot of pornography when he was a kid. But what he didn't tell Dobson is that when Bundy was a kid in Seattle, he used to go to an X-rated bookstore and not look at the dirty magazines they had in the front, but instead the owner of that bookstore also collected things like True Crime Detective, and that was the magazine, those were the magazines that Ted was attracted to. Sex and violence. Sex, you know, at some point way out there in outer space, they converge. So an act of horrible violence against women is also a sex crime. So, you know, I just grabbed a dozen. Every single one of these covers has it. So, I mean, here's the next one in here, with a woman with her legs up in the air. I mean, I don't know if this is a penthouse. It could be a penthouse, I suppose, huh? But it's instead a detective magazine. So somebody needs to do research on this. There's actually one article that Watt referred me to about that. Or maybe it was, no, that Ted Bundy referred me to. Some psychiatrist had written about it, but if that doesn't show it. I mean, every one of these. Blood, Sex, and Sweet Revenge. This is called True Action Detective, March of 1975.
I wonder if they're peer reviewed.
Yeah, right. But some of the information in it is actually okay.
You said peer reviewed or pure reviewed?
Yeah, right.
Sheila, here's a couple of these cards too. These are some of these slave cards. Under Georgia. Samson, slave, Savannah, Georgia, March 16, 1830. The Negro man Samson, for whom a reward of $100 was offered by the Justice of the Inferior Court, was captured on Saturday in Bryan County. He belongs to Dr. Waring of this city, and about 18 months since murdered Dr. W.'s driver. Wounded the overseer and ran away, since which he has baffled all efforts to take him. He will be tried in a short time, so that's a note. Here's Howard, who was executed. Here's slave, Cinda. A woman slave named Cinda was hanged at Augusta, Georgia on June 6, 1830 for setting fire to the city. So he's got a... See also slave Jenny, hanged December 1829. He's got just tons. These are just actually remarkable here. All these little case overviews. He's got some for Guam, Hawaii. I have it on the authority of Professor Addison M. Bowman, University of Hawaii Law School, from his testimony submitted to the State of Hawaii Senate on the question of capital punishment, that in Hawaii, 47 persons were executed between 1897 and 1944. And they list them 24 Filipino, 10 Japanese, 6 Korean, 3 Hawaiian, and on and on. Hanged Honolulu. This, I didn't even know this, but. Fukunaga, 19-year-old Japanese, hanged Hawaii, November 19th, 1929. Were you ever aware of the history of Hawaii?
No, I guess when it was a territory, they did have executions.
Vincente Casal, Filipino, 32, hanged Hawaii, March 2nd, 1929, for murdering a woman. He's got the site for remarkable stuff. It's just going on forever. I can't imagine 19,000 of those things. Slave executions in Maryland. A lot of stuff. There's military too. Joseph Perkins, military in New York City. The trial and execution of Joseph Perkins for desertion. Executed by firing squad at 4J in New York City on the morning of July 24th, 1799. Sent by Hearn, so it must have been Daniel Hearn, must have sent him the information from it. That's what Hearn wrote about off in New York, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's talking about a large cart, so there must be other carts for the stuff too.
Yeah, that was the referencing system used.
That's good. Nice thing a while along.
Well, I would like for it to be possibly with what you're collecting, because I believe it would be taken care of there, that it wouldn't be destroyed, any of it, even the duplicates. I want it where it can be used by other people, but I certainly want the project or being credited as being the source of my research, be it the source for any of my material that's used in research. Would that be possible?
If we're talking, when you say what we're doing, I'm assuming you're referring to the National Death Penalty Archive?
Yeah.
If your papers come there, if you send your papers there, that's our understanding what you had said, then it would be established as the Watty Espy collection, or whatever you wanted to call it. That would be your name and your collection.
Yes.
That would be then available to people to use as a research tool to go in and look at it. There's also the possibility, and that's what we were talking about before, could this still be an ongoing research project? In other words, you have this data, people can come and look at it, but it could still grow. It would seem to me. There's still things that could be researched.
Yes.
In keeping with the way you've done it in the past.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that would definitely, that's how we would approach it. It would be your collection, your name. If somebody was to use those documents to write a paper, a book, or whatever, then they would absolutely have to credit the source, the Watty Espy collection. That's how it's done.
Would there be any chance you might be able to come up to Albany one way or the other for to look over the archives for a reception, maybe announcing the gift of your work there, outlining your plans. I'm not sure how that would work, flying, or we would drive, or...
Would a train be possible?
Might be a train. We could look into that.
Well, I'll tell you, you know my feeling about flying.
Yeah, that's true. Watt's not a flyer.
And God didn't give me wings. I wouldn't mind flying if he had. But with all of this terrorist business and all going on, I would prefer we going by train.
Yeah, we should look into that. And this is something that you would prefer not to transfer anything now. You'd rather wait. Or is this something maybe you want to think about? That, for example, if you wanted to transfer it now, there'd be all sorts of advantages of you being around so that you could tell us, you know, Charlie, Jim, me, others working with it, what is this, or take a look at that, or blah, blah, blah. And, you know, also to do it under your direction, then I would plan on coming down here, you know, sometime, I don't know when, maybe over Christmas break or something, or sometime in the spring, and, you know, loading stuff up into some kind, I have no idea. I would imagine it would take a small U-Haul truck to get it wherever, but to get it to Albany. So we'd rent a truck, but before, you know, it would take several days of packing it before it left Headland.
Well, it's evident that I can't use it now. So I guess it might be a good idea to go ahead and transfer it. Let me show you how to do it.
Exactly. And would this be something that you had mentioned this morning that you thought Jim or maybe somebody, since Jim's a lawyer, should draw up a codicil on his will? Or you've got a lawyer in Dothan, right?
Yeah. But I never see him.
Is it something that we should, I mean, we'd be happy to do this, to make arrangements with the lawyer to, I guess what, talk to you on the phone so that any aspects of your will at all that you wanted to change, he could do it, drop the papers, and then once the papers are ready for signature, either you go to Dothan or the lawyer we'd ask the lawyer to come here. I suppose the lawyer could notarize it and have it all that done. Because you and I have been talking about that for several years.
Well, I think it requires two people.
Yeah.
To witness it. I don't think one of them would have to be a notary, would it?
I don't know. That varies by state. So whatever the state law, the lawyer would certainly know how to do it. But you know, this is something that you know, especially since there's other changes to your will you'd like to make. I mean, this is something that seems to me Monday morning we should call the lawyer and get going on that. And you could speak with the lawyer by phone, so the lawyer could draw up all the papers without having to meet you face to face. And you know, I'm sure the lawyer would call back and say, well, what about this or what about that? I mean, it would take a while for various aspects of it to be changed. But, and then, you know, for the official signing thing, you know, if you don't feel up to going to Dothan, then I'm sure the lawyer could come here and get Jeanette and somebody else to witness it. It's no big deal. I mean, we don't have to decide this today, but I'm just saying that this is something that we should...
Yes, I think you're right. that it's something I need to go ahead and take care of.
Do you want us to call, what's the lawyer's name? I've got it written down somewhere.
Charles Decker.
Charles Decker in Dothan.
Yes.
He might be somebody, because I'm a little bit, if you're talking about maybe doing this now and coming over Christmas break, I don't think you need a lawyer for that, because we've used, when we get collections in the past, we use a deed of gift.
Yeah.
Which Jim could fax. We have one. He could fax it to the lawyer. It's a standard form. You know, the lawyer could have him sign. All it has to be is notarized.
Yeah, well that could...
But that's another possibility if you want to do something.
But, you know, Watt wanted to change his will for other stuff too, so...
Oh, yeah, well, you could do
you
it
know,
all
the whole
at the same
thing.
time.
You know, Jim could draw up on the project, but, you know, he could not draw up on, you know, who's going to get your video collection.
No. This would just be for the archival stuff.
Yeah. But I would think that should be done as soon as possible, because, you know, the second reason is also that even if we came down here for a few days of Christmas, you know, we're not going to go through every drawer in the house to find stuff, and
No.
there's going to be stuff that after your death, when people clean out the house, they're going to find other stuff.
Yeah. And I want that to go too.
Yeah. So that's the advantage of doing it as a will, you know, and as soon as possible, and plus you could drop dead next week.
I can drop dead today the way I feel right now.
Well, we put you through a lot for one day, and rest assured we appreciate that, and so will literally...
Well, I'm just, you know, really sorry that I'm in this condition. I used to love to give interviews and all. I gave one about maybe a little over a year ago.
A little over a year ago you gave an interview?
Yeah, to an English concern. They called and asked for an appointment and offered me $1,000.
Wow.
So now,
And all you got from us was a burrito.
well,
And refried beans.
Refried beans.
Fried
Yeah.
beans, yeah.
that's all I needed at the time.
Right.
But I did the best I could. I don't know, they might have been dissatisfied. They said they weren't.
Well,
We haven't been dissatisfied at all.
Well, they said they weren't, so. But theirs was a lot better. I didn't weaken then.
but your memory of these cases too is obviously, I mean, it's faded a little bit.
Oh, it's
But,
faded a lot
yeah.
back,
Yeah.
a lot, because I used to have a recall and practice all of them.
Well, we went by your old house, and I was telling.
It's one that didn't fall in on my head.
Well, that's what I said when I got on the porch.
Yeah, we were a little cautious walking on the porch, but I told them about inside how you at one time had, I don't know, 100, 200 pictures, 5x7 pictures of executed inmates, and could look up and tell the story of each one.
Yeah, I used to be able to do that.
Tell Jim about the professor at Ohio State.
Oh yeah, that was a celebrated case. He had been on the American Olympics team for marksmanship, shooting a pistol. And he was a middle-aged man, and he was head of the Department of Veterinary Medicine, and he got fooling around with a girl student, and she fell in love with him, and he was married, and she threatened to and his wife, and he fell or he gave her an overdose of horse aphrodisiac.
The student or the wife?
The student.
The student.
And anyway, the story later came out, and they found that she had died of poison of this overdose. And they tried him and convicted him, and he was sentenced to be electrocuted, and he was electrocuted.
This is around pre-World War I?
No, it was after World War I.
Was it? In the 20s?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
the 20s or 30s.
But that was one of the pictures Watt had on his wall, and he oftentimes warned me about the dangers of being a college professor by
Yeah.
telling that story.
My brother actually is a college professor at Ohio State. I'll have to forewarn him, see if that's a deterrent to such dalliances.
You need to tell him about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are those pictures, you still have all those pictures?
Yeah, but they're in here. I don't know whether I can find them or not.
Well, you're familiar with Scott Christensen's work?
Who?
Scott Christensen, who did all the pictures that condemned at Sing Sing.
That was a little after Watt's time. He wrote a book, you remember, Scott Christensen, in the early 80s about life on death row. Matter of fact, it might have been called that, Life on Death Row.
No, I think it was Condemned Inside the
Condemned.
Sing Sing Death
Right,
House.
sorry. No, that was the later one.
That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
all the pictures, the
Right.
photographs.
Of all the people executed
Right,
at Sing Sing.
yeah.
No, I'd like to get a copy of that. It's,
Yeah.
they came out pretty good. I think they're in this first room here.
Yeah, it's pretty well piled up. I looked for the other ledger in there and I couldn't find it.
Get into it. I don't know that I could.
Yeah. No, that's another reason for thinking about coming down at Christmas or early next year. And that other reason is just to clean out some space for you all here.
Well, it was certainly do that.
But should we call this lawyer next week and have him get in touch with you, and let's just get that damn thing done.
Yeah, let's do it that way. You call him.
Okay. Could you send me an email to remind me to do
Yeah.
that? Okay.
No, I was going to suggest too, I don't know if you're open to it, if you come down here in November to Atlanta, you try not to switch, like do too many things at once.
Right.
You try not to do too many things at once.
Right. Like go to Atlanta.
Like just, oh, and I was going to say if you went to Atlanta, it's only like 31 minutes over here from there.
In a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping not to go to Atlanta, but
Okay.
also I just can't do it because I teach Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Gotcha.
And to get Watt stuff will take a commitment of several days.
Oh, okay.
And I'd rather do it, when we can do the job right. And plus, get a longer visit with Watt too.
Watt, most of your work has been historical in nature. You've looked back and documented all these executions. Look forward for a minute. What do you see? Where do you see the death penalty going in this country? What do you see the future of the death penalty in the United States?
I think ultimately it will be abolished. But it'll be abolished by the courts, not by an act of Congress, but by the courts. Because let's face it, the majority of the people in America favor the death penalty. And my thought is that that's going to continue to be the case of so many crimes committed that just shock me right to the heart. For instance, that little girl down in Florida who the convicted pedophile lived across the street from.
Joseph Smith.
No. Corey was his name.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he was just sentenced to death
Yeah.
in July or August 2007.
But there's so many cases like that that are happening. And every time one of them does happen, it makes people who favor the death penalty even more determined that we should have it. And it may give second thoughts to those of us who oppose it. I mean, it's just so horrible to contemplate a child being subjected to a murderer who has absolutely no conscience at all. And he held her prisoner in the trailer in which he lived across the street from her for several days. There's no telling what that child went through. That's Susan Smith in South Carolina, the one who
Drove her kids in the lake.
Yeah, I never will, I think now about that picture, and I can just see it. And I don't guess I'll ever forget it with those two little boys looking out the rearview mirror at their mother and they say,
But you think that future Supreme Court justices will change it, or maybe even some justices like Thomas or Scalia might come around before their deaths?
well, of course that's possible. I don't look for Thomas, Scalia, Alito, Roberts. Who's the other?
Kennedy.
Now Kennedy.
Kennedy is really a swing in the middle,
Yes.
and Stevens is in good shape.
I don't know how good a shape he's
Well,
in.
physically, yeah, he's 87. Souter and Ginsburg.
Well, Souter and Ginsburg and the other Clinton appointee,
Breyer, yeah.
I think they're okay. But all it'll take is one more. And as I said, the only chance that Bush could get a nominee in would be to nominate a Democrat. Particularly a Democratic senator.
Yeah. And you say that as a Republican. You were, I assume, like everybody else in Alabama, you were a Democrat up until, what, Jimmy Carter time?
No, I cast my first Republican vote in 1960.
For Eisenhower over Kennedy.
No, for
Nixon, Kennedy.
Or Nixon.
Nixon over Kennedy.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing that, you know, I was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1958, and I voted for Kennedy there for vice president. The reason was I couldn't stand Estes Keithall,
Right.
and that was due largely to Keithall's stand on civil rights. I felt like he was a traitor to the South. You know, back when I was a Democrat, I was a real bigot.
A real bigot.
I prayed for forgiveness, knowing I feel that God is forgiveness.
Yeah. And Watt, you've also helped a lot of men too with alcoholism. You wanna?
Well, I tried to. I'm a member of AA. I drank for 40 years, and I was a heavy drinker. Beer was my primary drink, but I could drink a case. And once I joined AA, I turned back to God. I don't think a drunk can really be a Christian. It just builds a wall between spirituality and thinking they'd do it right.
And this was when, about the early 90s, when you gave up drinking and smoking at about the same time, as I recall. Is that
No,
right?
3 years
3 years apart?
apart before I quit smoking. That was harder to me than quitting drinking. All it took for me to quit drinking was to go to a center, Charter Woods. It's closed down. It was down in Dothan, and go through a 28-day program. And I came to realize that alcohol had ruined my life. And then I turned to Christianity, which was made it me become even more adamant and I stand on the death penalty. The Bible says, judge not lest you be judged yourself. Oh! And then it also says, thou shalt not kill, and it doesn't place any restrictions on that. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill a murderer or anybody. Thou shalt not kill, period. So I believe that the Old Testament, of course, believed in the death penalty, but the New Testament does not. And I'm a Christian, and I just don't care for the Old Testament. I know that a lot of the New Testament is fulfillment of parts of the Old. But my view is that we don't know who wrote any of it. Men wrote it, men with different views.
I have a question, Watt.
Yeah.
Bill Bowers, who's somebody you've known for many, many years and we've worked with for a long time, when we were coming down, he reminded us and told us about a story, and I think you alluded to it earlier, about Henry Schwarzschild and bringing you to the National Coalition for a meeting of recognition of some sort or an award you'd won.
Yes.
What did that mean to you personally? What did that mean to you to go there and
Well,
to receive that award?
I was highly honored, of course. Anybody else would be. I don't know that I deserved it. I felt there were many people more deserving of it than I. President's back and Henry Schwarzschild. I miss Henry. It was always great talking to him. He had a very distinctive voice. He never did write anything, did he?
He wrote some op-eds in the New York Times, but I don't think he ever published an article in a regular academic journal. His brother did once. His brother was a philosopher and published one article, but I don't think Henry ever did.
What was that?
It was not for vocabulary.
What was the award that he was given? Do you remember-
Was
do you
it the
recall?
Abolitionist of the Year award? It was in,
I hope it was.
I think it was, yeah. It was in 1990, I think. It was at the meetings of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty in Seattle. And the other honoree there was Senator Ernie Chambers.
That was me. That was an award that I won.
Right.
Right.
And Ernie Chambers was the other. That was right after I quit drinking, too.
That was in Seattle?
No, it was right before you quit drinking.
No, it was right after.
Was it after? Okay.
Yeah, because some of them tried to get me to go in the bar, and I wouldn't
okay.
do it. It was, coffee shop was right across the hall from the bar, and I went in there and told us that wanted to talk to me about anything to come in there. Because you know, for a long time after I quit, I would go in places served because I was afraid the temptation might be too great, but it hadn't been. It doesn't bother me.
I remember Watt beginning that night with, I had just told Watt a dirty joke. And in Watt's acceptance speech in front of this group of 300 people, he said, well, Mike Radelet just told me this joke. Do you remember it?
No, I don't remember that.
It had to do with Pee Wee Herman. Anyhow, we'll talk about it off camera.
What was that?
The camera's got to go off. Right. But
It's some stuff that Mike's working on now, I'm working on, and it deals with the argument that executions are important to the victims, survivors, that they help bring closure or some measure of healing. And can you reflect on these executions that you've reviewed and comment on that?
Well, I'm going to be frank with you. I hear them say closure, but I don't think there's any such thing as closure. You tell me, do you have any children?
Yes, I do.
All right, you tell me if one of your children were taken, like that Lunsford girl down in Florida, by a pedophile and put through all of that and then buried alive, would there ever be any closure in your mind? Even if the man were, they allowed you to pull the switch, would that give you any closure?
It would take a effort that I have to wrestle with to oppose the death penalty at a time like that.
It does. I think it does. But the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged yourself in the Bible. urges us to forgive 7 times over. And I think we should do that. I really do. It's hard. I know it's hard. I did well when the Susan Smith thing happened. I thought to myself, my initial reaction was electrocute the bitch. But then after giving it more thought, the death penalty is an easy way out for a killer. Lock them up in a cell with the pictures of the victims all over the cell wall and keep them in there for the rest of their life. A lot of people say that's cruel, and I really think it is. It's a lot more cruel than giving them a lethal injection or anything else to live the rest of their life behind bars. I mean, look at John Gotti. If he had been found guilty in murder and executed, he would have been a lot better off than he was dying in a cancer in a prison. Though I'm sure he didn't get very good medical care. I hear people talk about closure, and I just don't believe there's any such thing as closure. As much as I think of you, Mike, if something happened to Jake, you'd never enjoy closure.
They say mortgages get closed, but yeah, that's for sure. The myth of closure, the myth that you can actually make things even, that you can pay back, that you can...
You can't do it.
And what I found working with families of homicide victims is that that desire for closure, when it focuses on seeing the killer dead, rips you apart.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure every anniversary, anything that reminds you of it, just rips you apart. It's like reliving it.
But the idea of forgiveness, whatever that means in this context, it's a difficult term, but whatever it means, by putting it away or being able to block it out or just moving on with your life, we do that not because we care for the killer, but because we care for ourselves. And it's the same way that the reason why I find myself fighting the death penalty is not so much for any great sympathy for the people on death row, but rather for what it does to us as a culture to sanctify that type of state activity.
Well, I feel that way too. Every time you electrocute a man, the family of the victim has to completely relive the incident through the trial, through each appeal, and through the electrocution. And then if the case is ripped up again, say 50 years from then, the family would still relive it. And I hear them say, closure, I want closure, that this will give me closure. Those people don't know what closure is, because you're not going to close it. You can forgive them, which is a Christian thing to do, but to be absolutely honest, I doubt that any one of us sitting here would forgive somebody who brutalized and murdered one of our near relatives. I just don't think it's possible.
Does anybody watch? Do you have anything, last words for us here? We're all done with questioning.
Well, I don't know that asking Watt for last words is really in the context the best way to phrase it. But.
Well, they may well be.
Oh, speaking of last words, there is, Mike said you have quite a few last words.
The last
from execution, or from different executions.
The last time I spoke at a prison for Alcoholics Anonymous, I told them, I said, I hope all of you, that I knew then what had happened. That I had this neuropathy and that this was going to happen. And I said, I hope future holds the very best for all of you. God only knows what it holds for me, if anything. I used to remember a lot of last words. I forget whose last words were, you can kiss my ass.
Right.
Somebody.
It says in Texas, the guy was saying, and I would like to thank my family, my minister, my lawyer, for all you have done for me, and the rest of you can kiss my ass.
Yeah.
Who was that? Everybody remember?
I don't remember. It's a post-Furman, Texas case.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Who said it.
There's a reporter now we met from the Chicago Tribune, I think it is. He was out to visit us a couple months ago. He's writing a book now on last words. He's researching them.
Yeah. There's one on last meals. There's one that on cartoons, which I've never really gotten all that excited about, but all that stuff.
I don't get excited over cartoons. I think they're very ill-advised.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember one inmate you told me about was up on the scaffold, public execution, and his last words, he looked down and he saw his family and his friends, and he says, you know, I've been to a dozen executions before, and I've enjoyed every one up to this one.
Yeah, I remember that. I forget who it was.
Well, you've uncovered some wonderful stuff, Watt, and it's something that you know, generations are gonna use, and I know that with Jim and Charlie and I can make the commitment to you that what you've done is just going to be a beginning, and we pledge to you that this stuff is going to be built on, developed, and the Espy database in 100 years, it'll have some asterisks to say, you know, augmented through the work of so-and-so and so-and-so, and built up, and give credit to others who build it. But it will be known for generations as the Espy database, and it truly will be a historical database when all the death penalty stuff is turned over to the historians, and the lawyers and the sociologists, after it's abolished, can get on to do other things.
Well, that's not going to be any time soon.
Not this week.
Or next. No. I think it would be wonderful if it were, you know, when these people started coming forth and with the blood, the DHR or whatever.
DNA, yeah.
DNA, and some proven innocent, I thought to myself there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what we need. But shit, in the South, it don't make a damn.
Well, it has in other areas, so it's changed now. We've got the polls showing majority given the option of life without parole. It's 48% for life without parole, 47% for the death penalty. So
Well, I didn't know that.
even in the last 10 or 15 years, we've made some huge progress. So
Yes, we have. I didn't know that.
I want to say, Watt, thank you very much for letting us come in and talk
Well,
with you for a couple hours
I
today.
have enjoyed it, and my getting in bed was not because I didn't enjoy it. I simply gave up. That's the thing about diabetes. It's a hell of a damn illness, I'll tell you.
You've been very gracious with your time.
Well, thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.